Vietnam-US seafood trade, from modest beginnings to remarkable growth. Over the last 3 decades, Vietnam-US seafood trade has evolved from a modest commercial flow into one of the most dynamic pillars of bilateral economic cooperation. What began in the late 1990s as a small, largely shrimp-based export sector has expanded into a diversified, high-value industry supplying nearly $2 billion worth of seafood to the US each year. As the two countries mark the 30th anniversary of diplomatic normalization in 2025, Vietnam's seafood industry stands as a powerful example of how regulatory reform, global integration, and private sector resilience can reshape a national export landscape. The early years of Vietnam-US seafood trade were defined by limited production capacity, rudimentary processing technology, and barriers arising from narrow market access. In 1997, Vietnam exported just 39 million USD worth of seafood to the US, with frozen shrimp accounting for nearly the entire basket. But the signing of the Vietnam-US Bilateral Trade Agreement (BTA) in 2000 became a watershed moment, including tariff reductions, expanded market access, and strengthened regulatory commitments allowed seafood shipments to surge to nearly 300 million USD in the early 2000s. For the first time, Vietnam seafood processors could compete systematically in the world's largest consumer market. Vietnam's accession to the World Trade Organization in 2007 further accelerates this momentum. With harmonized standards, clearer rules, and growing inflow of investment into modern processing facilities, Vietnamese seafood exports to the US surpassed 700 million USD in 2008 and crossed the 1 billion USD threshold in 2010. By 2014, combined exports of shrimp, pangasius, and tuna propelled the total value to 1.74 billion USD, then a historic high. These three product groups became the backbone of Vietnam's export portfolio, each benefiting from economies of scale, stronger value chain management, and rising global brand recognition for Vietnamese seafood. Even in the face of unprecedented disruptions, most notably the COVID-19 pandemic and global supply chain dislocation, Vietnam seafood exports to the US demonstrated remarkable resilience. The second achieved 1.62 billion USD in 2020, despite widespread logistical bottlenecks, then climbed to 2.5 billion USD in 2021 and reached an all-time peak of 2.15 billion USD in 2022. When inflation, high inventories, and softer consumer spending in the US briefly dampened demand in 2023, shipments still totaled 1.56 billion USD before rebounding to 1.82 billion USD in 2024. Projections for 2025 suggest exports could approach 1.95 billion USD, a figure nearly 50 times higher than 1997. Shrimp has been at the heart of this long-term expansion. From 32 million USD in 1997, shrimp exports grew to more than 1.6 billion USD in 1914 and have stayed consistently strong, ranging between 800 million USD and 1.5 billion USD in the last decade. The sector continues to benefit from investment in broodstock improvement, biosecurity, processing technology, and market diversification. By 2025, shrimp exports to the US are expected to reach more than 814 million USD, reaffirming the product's leading position. Pangasius has followed a different but equally significant trajectory. Rapid growth between 2010 and 2018 pushed annual shipments to between 300 million USD and 550 million USD, driven by competitive pricing, improved farming standards, and the growing recognition of Pangasius as a versatile, affordable whitefish for US consumers. Notwithstanding persistent headwinds, especially anti-dumping duties, rising compliance demands, and periodic media scrutiny, Vietnam's Pangasius exporters have sustained a strong presence. Forecasts indicate Pangasius exports will remain above 330 million USD in 2025. Tuna, once a marginal export item, has also become a solid growth driver. From negligible levels in the 1990s, tuna exports reached nearly 487 million USD in 2022 and currently fluctuate between 350 million USD and 390 million USD. Meanwhile, other product groups, marine fish, crab, squid, octopus, and various mollusks, are gaining momentum, demonstrating Vietnam's strategic move toward a more diverse and resilient export mix. Yet the next phase of growth will not be defined by volume alone. As global markets tighten sustainability requirements, the US is setting increasingly stringent standards on traceability, emissions, labor practices, and environmental protection. Vietnam's seafood industry must therefore adapt by accelerating digital transformation, strengthening transparency across the supply chain, and aligning closely with U.S. regulatory frameworks such as the Marine Mammal Protection Act (MMPA). Compliance is no longer optional, but central to long-term market access. Industry leaders emphasized that despite strong achievements, systemic challenges remain. Anti-dumping duties on shrimp and pangasius have persisted for more than 20 years, creating legal uncertainty and raising the cost of doing business for Vietnamese exporters. These measures, combined with shifting food safety requirements, competition from other suppliers, and mounting expectations around sustainability, have placed constant pressure on producers to innovate, consolidate, and upgrade operations. According to Lê Hằng, Deputy Secretary General of VASA, the MMPA represents one of the most significant regulatory hurdles yet, requiring full traceability and comprehensive marine mammal protection standards for wild-caught seafood. Meeting such requirements demands close coordination between government agencies, fishing communities, processors, and U.S. import partners. Although challenging, this compliance path also offers an opportunity to elevate Vietnam's brand as a reliable, responsible, and environmentally conscious global seafood supplier. It is also important to recognize that Vietnam and the US are not competitors in seafood. They are complementary partners in a mutually reinforcing value chain. While the US remains one of Vietnam's most important buyers of processed seafood, Vietnam relies on US agricultural exports such as soybeans, corn, and wheat, key ingredients in aquaculture feed. This two-way trade relationship supports jobs, strengthens supply chains, and creates shared economic benefits on both sides of the Pacific. Looking ahead, the elevation of bilateral relations to a comprehensive strategic partnership in 2023 provides stronger foundation for cooperation in trade facilitation, green supply chains, digital technologies, and sustainable aquaculture. Policy stability, transparent regulations, and deepening private sector collaboration are expected to shape the next chapter of Vietnam-US seafood relations. After 30 years of integration, Vietnam seafood exports to the US have evolved from early-stage participation to deep involvement in global value chains and now toward a sustainability-driven future. The pathway forward will require persistent investment, regulatory alignment, and a long-term strategic vision, but will consistent market demand, an increasingly sophisticated industry, and strengthened bilateral ties, the prospects for continued growth remain highly favorable. From 39 million USD in the late 1990s to nearly 2 billion USD today, Vietnam's seafood trade with the US stands as a testament to 3 decades of transformation, marked by resilience, innovation, and a commitment to long-term partnership.